Hi guys, BuildZoid here, and today we're going to be taking a look at another irrelevant old graphics card. Today, an R9 280X. I think this is a Tri-X because it doesn't seem to have the higher clock speed BIOS. So basically there was like a Tri-X version and a Toxic version. Both cards have the same heatsink, both cards have the same PCB, but the Toxic cards had a 1150 megahertz boost BIOS, whereas this has an 1100 megahertz boost BIOS. And yeah, this is an R9 280X, so basically just a rebranded 7970. These also come with like different memory timings, which might be just because they come with different, like more modern memory chips or something like that. It is just a regular 3 gig card. And as you can see, I've obviously taken off the shroud. Well, the shroud's gone, and this actually works really, really well in terms of the cooling on the card. And I just realized that I did not prepare for this video properly, so I'm gonna go quickly dig up the folder. Oh yeah, I'm just gonna drop that onto the video. So anyway, so this actually works really, really well. But the story behind why I have this card is really, really simple. I saw it on eBay. Well, I'm a huge Sapphire fan. I don't have a R9 280X of any other kind, so I kind of figured, well, also the card was orange, and it was relatively cheap because the seller basically said, hey, it has some issues with like intermittent random crashing, which I've not run into yet, and I have, unlike with a lot of my other cards where it's basically if it finishes 3D Mark, then it's all like that's good enough for me. With this card, I've actually run not like an hour-long stress test, but extended load tests to get like an idea if the heatsink, if the cooling setup is working well, if the card is crashing or not, and it's not crashing. So I don't know. Maybe just my usual maintenance procedure has fixed whatever was wrong with the card, because when I got it, it was in not so great condition. So I honestly consider it kind of an eBay rescue because, yeah, it was pretty bad. So and it was so like when I got the card, smelled like cigarettes, with really quite dusty. And that's why we don't have the front shroud anymore, because basically what I went through was like, okay, I figured out how to get the shroud to stop smelling like cigarettes, and it's basically just a really like a long alcohol bath, and that takes care of that. But you do that to fans, and it generally just wrecks the bearings on them. So it's just like, okay, well, can't really do that with a fan. Um, and at that point, it was like, okay, so I could just buy new replacement fans for the card. But once I'm putting money into the card, it's like, well, I could upgrade the cooling system, right? Like that. The thing about a lot of like fans that you get on GPUs is that they're very skinny, right? Because for clearance reasons, so that you can get a GPU cooler into a 2-slot package, the fans are going to be really, really thin. The end result is that they actually are god awful in terms of like RPM versus airflow metrics compared to thicker fans like these. Yeah, so basically I was like, okay, so you know what? If I'm gonna be like if I'm gonna be buying new fans for the card, which I'm gonna be doing anyway, right? Because the ones it came with were, in my opinion, just unusable at that point. Um, since I was going to be swapping the fans, I was like, well, might as well upgrade them at that point. And then it was just like, well, I could go for some regular 90 millimeter, like these I think are like 92 millimeters or something like that. Wait, we have a tape measure here, and I think they are. Yeah, so it's like, so these are just over. So these are 100 millimeters across because of the silly shroud going on there. But basically, I like the card at stock is like, yeah, it's like 290 millimeters long. So I was like, yeah, I could totally fit some 92 millimeter fans on this. And I was looking into 92 millimeters fans, and I kind of realized very quickly that, you know what, they are rather expensive. And then it hit me like, hey, I could check out, like, I could probably just use like fans off of AMD stock coolers, because I have a couple of those already. But none of them are actually matched. So I have like, with my misfortune, I didn't have like 3 matching fans. So I was like, okay, you know what I'll do? OCUK is actually selling Ryzen stock coolers like Wraith Stealths, Wraith RGBs, Wraith Prisms, all of the different sort of Wraith stock coolers. They sell them because they build, systems, and I assume they build them with boxed CPUs, and when they do that, they have to get rid of the heat sinks. So they sell like Wraith Stealths for £5 a piece. So you get a 92 millimeter fan with the, like, I wanted the AMD branding ring on it, so it was like, yeah, you get a 92. I think it's a 90 or 80 or whatever, but it should be a 92 because the external is 100. Like the actual fan blades should be 92. So, since these are, you know, like that size, it's like, okay, so I could buy like a Be Quiet 92 millimeter or a Noctua 92 millimeter for like 10 quid, or I could just buy a bunch of Wraith stealth coolers for 5 quid a piece and just use those fans off of those. And I get the, you know, AMD branding on those. So I went with this option because I just decided, hey, it would be pretty cool if I had like 3 of these AMD fans. And I was kind of considering like having them angled so that this wouldn't stick up so much. But that didn't really work out because once I actually got all of these fans, I quickly realized that I wasn't getting the fin coverage that I wanted, which is how we ended up with this little FM2 Plus cooler fan that I just already had down the center of the cooling system. So that's what's going on with the fans here. And this works really, really well. Like the end result is that the card runs a maximum of 61 degrees Celsius. Like this is from an extended like load test I ran, and it was like, well, actually, so there it's in that photo it's sitting at 60, but I actually ran it for a bit longer, and eventually it went up to like 61 degrees, and that was with a relatively, and that was with this sort of, oops, I didn't realize this picture would be so massive, and that was with this kind of test setup. So open air test bench, of course, and you can actually see where the K-type thermocouple is in that picture. So the yellow wire over here is the K-type. So it's not exactly like, it's not picking up the actual exhaust of the card because that's sort of in this area above the card and sort of to there. And it's not also like, the thing is, with the way I have the heatsink here is what you actually get is when this is installed in a system, this fan right here, the used air from the center of the card right here, that actually washes back. And this is a problem with all of this style of heatsink. Like this is just an issue that you run into with it. You basically get air that gets shoved into the fin stack this way, and then it blasts out the bottom, and then it deflects back off the motherboard, and it piles up in front of the heatsink again. So actually, like right in front of the heatsink, you have used air just kind of building up unless you have a fan like blowing across the card or onto the card or something, right? Like, so basically, I didn't want to put the K-type thermocouple anywhere in front of the card because the temperature that it would be measuring there would be actually significantly higher. So I wanted to actually measure like room temperature rather than, you know, the wash off the card. So that's why the K-type is sitting where it is. But as you can see, we were at like 25, maybe 26 degrees Celsius. That thermocouple is, well, that thermometer isn't that accurate. Yeah, 25, 26 degrees ambient temperature, and this card was holding 60. And that's with an overclock. Admittedly, it's stock volts, but the thing is, these fans on the card, they don't go above 2000 RPM because these are off of Wraith stealth coolers, not off of Wraith RGBs, or I'm not sure which one it is, but basically these are zero point 0.2 amps, and if you buy this is the Wraith Stealth is AMD 65 watt TDP heatsink. These are 2000 RPM fans. If you buy the 95 watt RPM, 95 watt rated heatsink, that one comes with 0.3 amp-ish fans. It also depends on the maker because like this is a Cooler Master fan. This one's 0.15 amps. These are AVC. These are 0.2 amps. And I have a bunch of Foxcons which use the same fan blade design as these Cooler Master ones, and I think those are back to 0.15 amps again. So, yeah, but basically the Wraith Stealth coolers have lower RPM fans on them than the sort of 95 watt TDP heatsinks and the 125 watt TDP heatsink. So this thing is dead silent because it doesn't go above 1900 RPM, which I'm actually kind of annoyed about because I was really hoping to get well, it runs cool. It hits 60, right? So you can't really complain about the temperature, but I wanted this to be like an overclocking configuration, and this is like, well, like I wanted at least like 3K, or well, I wanted like 2.5K or maybe 3K RPM, and I get 19.5, well, 1950 ish. And that's measured from this fan. And the way all of these fans are actually attached, they're actually hooked up to the fan power of the GPU. So that's pretty cool. So you do actually, like, it has working fan control, which is like something I don't bother with a lot of the time, but here I did. So that's basically a little adapter that I just sort of like, it's not very pretty, but it works, right? So the way this is actually set up is it's taking the PWM it's taking the RPM signal off this fan. So I only know the RPM of this fan right here, but the PWM signal is fed into all 3 fans. So all of them are controlled by the same PWM line. This one technically has a little thermistor on the back of it. So at higher ambient temperatures, this one will actually have a higher maximum RPM. So this one's both PWM and temperature, has its own temperature control built into it. I have a couple of these which are like modified to get rid of the thermistor, and those then go up to like 6,500 RPM. But that's not very pleasant to listen to. So, this could spin up if the ambient temperature around the fan got really really hot, because that's normally how the fan speed on these fans is controlled. But yeah, it hasn't really gotten into that situation. Like, I haven't noticed it getting any faster, and throughout the testing I've done so far. So yeah, this cooling setup actually is surprisingly effective, and I'm a fan of the fact that I get to have my little AMD branding on my AMD card. Even though it's definitely not the prettiest thing ever, I'm fine with it. It's nicer than some of the other monstrosities I've built, right? For my standards, this is pretty good. It works really well. It runs really cool. It might not be the prettiest thing ever, but at least it doesn't have to plug into like your motherboard or something, right? Or into a separate extension cable. And it does have working fan control sliders in software. Like, you can set the fan speed to whatever you want. So that's pretty neat. The other thing that was an issue when I got the card is actually all of the mounting screws right here. These are non-stock, because when I got the card, evidently the previous owner did try to do some maintenance, though I got it and it looked like, I guess it could have been a lot worse. Like, it could have always been just way dustier. So evidently the previous owner did try to do some maintenance, or whoever had it before them, because the mounting hardware for the card was just completely stripped out. So I replaced all of that, because honestly, I was worried I wouldn't be able to get the heatsink off, because there was one of these screws was just like, it was basically round when it was supposed to be a Phillips head. But I do have a bunch of spare mounting hardware off of a bunch of other GPUs that I've over the time just taken apart and never used the heatsink on again and that kind of thing. So yeah, I have a bunch of spare mounting hardware, so replace the mounting hardware with these. These are for flathead screwdrivers, so yeah, these won't strip out ever, basically. And they're, I think, off some Power Color card that I picked up that was like dead. Yeah, and I basically decided to just use it for spare parts. That's what's going on with that. And at this point, we'll just take it apart and look inside, because this PCB is actually the same PCB you get on a 7970 Toxic, except that this doesn't have 6 gigs of VRAM. So that's kind of the other reason that I wanted to pick up one of these cards, is because this is a really interesting PCB. It also has a really awesome VRM for VCore, the memory rail and the memory power, and what else was it? The memory controller power is actually not that impressive on this card. And yeah, but VCore on these is really awesome. So let's just get that unplugged. So yeah, there's the front of the card. And yeah, that's the only bit of plastic still left from sort of the original heatsink. It does come with little VRM heatsink. That's from the original card, and also another one over here. I replaced all the thermal pads because those were obviously just disgusting when I got the card as well. The thermal paste is Kingpin Cooling KPX. Because unlike Cryonaut, this doesn't scratch up dies, and it's really like the performance is really really good with it. So at least my batch of Cryonaut just has a really, like, the grains of aluminum oxide in it are really really large, and so they just scratch up everything you use it on. So with this card, I'm like, okay, we're going to use KPX. Thermally, it performs just fine. The main thing is, I think KPX is technically even more expensive than Cryonaut, depending on, depending on the shipping, obviously. So that's just kind of the one downside with it. But anyway, I just realized I need another screwdriver. And I can't see it, which is great. Oh, found the other screwdriver. There we go. So we can continue disassembling the card. So Yeah, also the BIOS switch is actually all kinds of messed up as well. I mean, it works, like it functions, it's just like it looks really bad condition. So yeah, I really consider this card a bit of a rescue, and it's just very unfortunate that the GPU core on it is absolutely amazing. Like it is so much better than all of the other VaporX 7970s I have, which you can kind of consider it one of them because it is just a 280X, right? Same GPU core. Um, this thing's core is so much better. This does 1220 megahertz core on stock voltage. Up, go. So yeah, there's the thermal pad. That's 2 millimeters thick, so that's not exactly ideal, but it works. Like this is an 8 watts per meter Kelvin thermal pad that I picked up on DigiKey, and I can't remember the brand of. I think it was like Taika Corporation or something. So yeah, I buy my thermal pads off of DigiKey because when you buy them there, you get like if you normally buy thermal pads in a regular store, you get them in like 10 by 10 like 10 by 10 centimeter squares. On DigiKey, they sell them in like 200 by 20 by 20 or even like 40 by 40. So because I go through a lot of cards, I buy my thermal pads basically in bulk. So yeah, there's the VRM. So that's an 8-phase V-core. It's again one of those cards where you have those special Sapphire inductors that go all the way through the PCB. And on this card, this is like the reason why I wanted another one of these cards is because basically I really want to experiment with some stuff related to these inductors because, well, I'm like whatever. Like basically the thing I wonder about with these cards, and actually my 7970 Vapor X at least seems to have seems to sort of indicate that it might be an issue, is that on the 7970 Vapor X 6 gig, which uses the same style VRM, which actually there's like the Vapor X cards actually have two different VRMs. There's a 7-phase V-core and there's an 8-phase V-core. This is the 8-phase. The 7-phase is for the 3 gig cards. The 6 gig cards had the 8-phase, and this is a 280X, and this keeps the 8-phase. This VRM is awesome. In terms of power delivery, it's really, really great. But there's one minor issue with it that at least I think there's a minor issue with the fact that these chokes go straight through the VRM. You basically have massive holes in the ground plane of the VRM here. So pushing current to the core, that's all very well and good. Current coming from the core back to the VRM is kind of like, where does it even go? Like it basically has to squeeze, because basically your ground plane is like it squeezes in between the inductors like so, and that just doesn't seem like the best idea ever. So yeah, I want to kind of experiment with maybe trying to add some extra ground connections basically from in front of the inductors to behind the inductors and see if that helps with the voltage drop across the power plane. So I still have to do a bunch of measuring related to that. So I'm not really, like currently so far what I've been doing with the card is just upgrading the cooling system and doing very minor things. So yeah, that's just kind of, and like testing that it works and everything before I start really abusing it. Um, but yeah, but for the actual VRM, so it is an 8-phase, and what you'll notice is we actually have two, which we can zoom in on that, which is going to be a great idea. So what you'll notice is we actually have two low side MOSFETs in each phase, and these are, I think they're 6894s for this one. Okay, no, they're 6725s, but the 6725 is like it's also ridiculously low RDS on. So basically like this VRM is stupid powerful. For an 8-phase, it is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, it's really, really powerful. I've already used like the 7976 gig Vapor X I have with this same VRM, like it runs ice cold. Or at least like it doesn't have any thermal issues, and even on like almost 1.5 volts on liquid nitrogen. The main issue I had with that card was again just like silly amounts of V-droop, so that's kind of what I want to try work around on this card. And also maybe I'm not sure if like the V-droop might be programmed into the VRM due to the weird power plane situation the ground plane being a mess. The thing is, I also tried already, like, okay, wait, I need to start that over, because, so there's one downside to this PCB. So VRM is very powerful, that's great. The ground plane might not have the greatest integrity, so that might be an issue. But there's one much bigger issue with all of these cards using this VRM right here. There is no way to control there's no software that gets voltage control on these. I don't know why, but Afterburner doesn't work, Sapphire Tricks doesn't work, nothing works. Like absolutely nothing works. You can't even change the core voltage in the BIOS. So naturally, I was like, okay, well, I have an Infineon USB 005 dongle. I'll try use that to control the CHL Chill 8228 voltage controller that we have on here, because that's an international rectifier part. International rectifier owns Chill. Or at least I think they own Chill, or Chill might just be a branding thing for International Rectifier. I can't remember where the naming comes from anymore, but it's International Rectifier, and at this point that's Infineon, so I was like, hey, if I use the Infineon dongle, it might be able to control this International Rectifier part, because Infineon owns International Rectifier. Well, no, it doesn't. It does not control this chip whatsoever. It doesn't recognize it. So yeah, that's great. And unfortunately, like the card even comes with the little header for the dongle to connect to right here. And yeah, like you can connect to it and it just doesn't give you any, like the software just doesn't recognize the chip. So that really, really sucks, because I was really hoping to get to play with like switching frequency, LLC settings and all that kind of thing, but nope. Can't do that. I also wanted to have like proper digital voltage control instead of having to mess around with hard physically modifying the feedback circuits, but which is not the best idea, because it can potentially lead to all kinds of issues. But yeah, unfortunately, that seems to be the only way to control this. Well, the thing is, if there was a public register map, then you could just get anything to access it over I2C, but can't be done. Like literally can't be done as far as I can tell. So yeah, that really sucks, and that's really annoying, because this VRM is really, really cool. It's really like literally it actually runs really cool, and it's really powerful. And I really wanted to get a chance to try use all of the features, like be able to digitally set the load line calibration and all that kind of thing. And nope, can't be done. So that's really, really unfortunate. But I can still, I've modified these before, and actually I figured out on my 7950 how to even physically modify the load line a little bit. The thing is, like, the load line, like, there's an external resistor for controlling the load line, but it's also used for, like, temperature compensation or something. And so if you just try to, like, completely remove any V-droop, it actually causes massive issues. You can't just do that. So yeah, it's like I really would prefer if I had software control, but there's no register map, so I can't really do that. And there's not really any card that I can like revert. Well, yeah, I'm not aware of any card that would allow me to like copy the settings off of for this controller right here. It's not like the 356. Well, for a 3567B, I can just use the dongle from Infineon and it works. So yeah, that's the main downside to this PCB. As nice as it is that for whatever reason Sapphire has these controllers just like locked down in software. Because a lot of other cards with the 8228, perfectly good software voltage control. All right, like ton of other cards, no issues with software voltage control. It's literally just these where you don't have software voltage control, and I don't know why, but you don't. So that really, really sucks. Anyway, in the memory VRM and memory controller VRM department, we've got this little heatsink over it. And there we're not really looking at anything impressive. It does look a little bit like there's 3 phases over there, but we're looking at a typical... Man, these thermal pads are really sticky. There we go. Okay, so there, but it's actually just so there we go. I'm gonna hold it up. Actually, wait. No, you can see that just fine. We can just zoom in again. Keep forgetting that I have a nice camera now, which I've had for a while. So yeah, anyway, but there is your memory controller rail. So that's this one, and that goes through this inductor. And then we have low side, single high side MOSFET, and that goes through these 2 inductors, and that's your memory power, or at least I think it goes through 2 inductors, but that there is the memory power, and that feeds all of the actual memory chips around the card. And you may have noticed that I have already started adding capacitors to the card, because the main, like, as nice as the core on this card is, which it does like 1215 megahertz or even 1220 on a cool day at the locked voltage that this ships at, which is like 1.2 something volts. So it's really like it's one of the best to like as far as the full 2048 core Tahiti chips go. This is probably the best one I own. I have a 7950 that my 7950 I think is better than this, but this is the best 2048 stream processor chip I have. So yeah, the core on this is amazing. The memory kind of sucks, even though it's SK Hynix. So at least like, and by kind of sucks, like some of the other SK Hynix cards I have, you can do like 1800 plus megahertz on the memory, and then there's this one where you can't go past 1750. Or like 1800-ish kind. Well, 1800 I think works or something like that. Like it's not anywhere. It's not as good as the other cards, basically. And so I tried remedying that with extra capacitors. That didn't really seem to make much of a difference. But I did figure out a new technique for like mounting these. Like these are multi-layer ceramics on the 2917 aluminum polymer / tantalum SMD package. Right, so like, and the Sapphire actually left these pads unoccupied. So normally you'd have a capacitor, and I'm in the wrong place. Right, so normally you'd have a capacitor like this, sitting where this is, but Sapphire just left these unoccupied. And so I was like, well, I could use some of these because I have a bunch of these, but then thought a bit about it, and it's like, well, technically multi-layer ceramics should electrically be superior, and if Sapphire decided that they don't need more bulk capacitance, then I'll just use a bunch of multi-layer ceramics instead. So these are 47 microfarad multi-layer ceramics, and that's how I attach them. It does look like it's literally just a giant blob of solder, and I do have one concern with attaching them like this, and that's basically when the solder cools down and shrinks, it might be putting a lot of physical stress on the capacitors, which multi-layer ceramics are not physically robust, so these might blow up someday. Good thing that I don't really run the cards 24/7, so it's not really a concern, but yeah, it is it's just kind of like, this is probably not the best idea for any kind of long-term installations, because yeah, that like I'm not sure. Like this is not something you would do if you cared about reliability, which I obviously don't. Now the other thing that I'm really annoyed about with this card is this right here. So yeah, that's that it came with that. So that's from the previous owner as well. So that might be why the memory clock's like garbage, but there's more. Because of course there is, and I'm just. Ugh. Where are we? There we are. So yeah, and you can sort of see that again, we have some scraped off solder mask down here. It's not as bad as in the top right corner though. And I think there was a little bit in, where was it? We have a little bit around here, right? So just a little bit. So yeah, the card really didn't turn up in the best condition when I got it, but it runs great. The core is absolutely amazing. So, you know, I freaking love the core. On this thing. In fact, here's the, like, I ran a sort of just for the sake of this video kind of benchmark, and yeah, you can see right there, 1215 megahertz core, 1750 memory. Okay, yeah, so it's still stuck at 1750. Yeah, Caps didn't do anything. So yeah, but it scores great. So mostly because it's being carried by the 7940X really hard, but yeah, the core seems absolutely amazing, so I do really want to keep working on this card, and next thing is just getting voltage control and maybe some V-droop, reduce V-droop. Probably going to be adding extra capacitors to the V-core, which that's just going to be all over the place. And the goal is, like, I think, honestly, if this card scales with voltage properly, it should be able of hitting over 1300 megahertz on, like, water cooling quite easily. And then I would like to take it sub-ambient. And considering that, I think my 7970 Vapor X that scaled like absolute garbage at ambient, which it did like what? What was it? I think it did 1280 on water cooling. Like, yeah, it scaled, like, it didn't scale with voltage basically at all, and it topped out at like 1280 on water cooling, and if you gave it any more voltage, it actually just got less stable. So that card only scaled with temperature. So I took that one on liquid nitrogen. That one does 1550 and it has weird voltage issues. But this one, right? If this one works well, which unfortunately it's not a 7970 because 7970s are worth more points, even though this is the same damn core. But Um, yeah, if this behaves properly, like this should probably clock way higher than my other card. Um, and yeah, and this time around, since I've already worked with one of these before, I kind of already know all of the tricks to working with these again. So yeah, I'm super super excited to find, like, the core is amazing. Now it's just like maybe figure out something for the memory. I have some ideas I want to try to maybe see, like, if I can, like, the traces aren't broken because it's not like it runs. So the memory evidently still works. It's just like I'm concerned that maybe the traces are like oxidized too much or something, or maybe they're just scraped up so badly that they're limiting the maximum frequency. It could also just be the memory chips don't do 1750. I don't even know that those are data lines for all I know, right? But it's just like, I mean, like that there would be awfully convenient to restrict my max frequency, right? So, yeah, I'll see if I can do something about that. Um, I don't really want to do anything too dangerous to it, but yeah, like this is definitely a card that I want to keep working on because core is amazing. Need to get the memory working. I need to get. I want to, like, I'll be running like a BIOS with modified memory timings, probably locked power states as well, and voltage. Um, so yeah, like I have a ton of plans for this card. This thing's gonna be awesome. Like, especially since the core is so nice. So yeah, I kind of consider it like a rescue slash restoration project where, well, it's not really a restoration project because I'm replacing everything that I don't like and upgrading everything that doesn't seem good enough. But yeah, so doing the, it came to me in awful condition and now it's in buildzoid condition, which arguably is worse, right? Because previously somebody was able to sell it on eBay. At this point, I really doubt it would. Well, at this point, it's not for sale because I won't let it go because I've already gotten really attached to it because it's like, oh my god, I get the Vapor X PCB I always wanted, except this time with a core that doesn't suck. Um, so yeah, that's exciting. And it also lets me just try out a bunch of things, and then if everything, like, if I figure out something really great for this card, then I can just take whatever I figured out for this card and throw it onto the 6 gig card as well. And so yeah, that's just yeah, I'm just excited, and I figured I'd show this card off, and I do actually want to keep this one in a condition where the backplate still fits on it. The other one, I kind of added so many capacitors that you can't fit a backplate on it anymore, and that kind of thing. So not this one. This one I do want to keep the backplate. Um, and yeah, I want to keep this card like relatively dailyable, right? Like if somebody wanted to actually run it in their daily system, it could, which is why like I'm keeping the stock heatsink in a decent condition as well, and why I swapped. Well, it's not decent condition, but why I like upgraded the stock cooling system, because otherwise, like, I don't care about the stock cooling system. I can just whack a Morpheus on the card if the stock cooling system isn't good enough, right? Um, but yeah, I just kind of decided, like, I'm such a huge Sapphire fanboy that I just kind of wanted to do this as a more of a restoration than a straight up benching monstrosity. But inevitably, I will end up running this sub ambient sooner or later. I might just take it on dry ice first because honestly, if you have a good core with the AMD cards, even on dry ice, they'll actually clock really high. So I'm not sure why I'm reassembling. Oh yeah, we could have talked a little bit about the cooler. So the cooler here is actually kind of what I would consider a pretty brute force cooler compared to some of like the Vapor X cards. So there's no vapor chamber. This is just a copper plate. And I'm ruining my thermal pads. Good job, me. Um, yeah, so that's just a copper plate. Then we have an aluminum plate all around that. And the plate is not fitted at all to the card, which, yeah, means basically you need to run some really, really thick thermal pads, which is not ideal for memory temperatures, but like, I don't think it's a temperature issue with the memory because the memory will crash immediately as soon as you start the benchmark. So it's like if you have a temperature stability problem, then it'll crash after a certain period of runtime when the temperature is high enough. If you have a just general constant stability problem, it'll just crash as soon as you hit that speed, right? Which is exactly what happens with this card. You set 1850 megahertz memory, you start the benchmark crashes. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on with the card. But still, I'm really really happy that I managed to get my hands on it, and I'm also really happy with the way the cooling system turned out. Though I'm kind of annoyed that I didn't get the higher RPM fans because it's just like, you know, ultimately I don't care about the noise that much from this. And I mean, it's nice that it's quiet, but it's at this point it's actually quieter than the rest of the test bench. So it's just like, well, that like the whole system's loud anyway. So yeah, it doesn't do anything for me that the card's quiet. Um, but yeah, so that's it for this video, and hopefully this was somewhat interesting and inspires maybe, you know, you to modify your own cards as well in ridiculous ways like this. I don't know. I just do this for fun because seriously, it's just interesting to try stuff with cards, and basically, like, I guess it's kind of like how people build cars just for fun, except this is much more boring because it doesn't make any noise or go fast, right? It just well, I guess you could say it spits out frames fast, or I mean, well, if you wanted faster frames, you just buy a 2080 Ti, but you know, those are expensive, and you can do silly modifications to cheap cards just as well as you can do silly modifications to expensive cards. So yeah, and it's less of a loss when you break one of these, though I'd be pretty sad if I broke this because the core is so damn good. But anyway, this video is apparently 35 minutes long at this point, so I think I'll end it here because yeah. Wait, did I talk about how this works? I think I did, right? Like that it's like PWM, well, whatever. It's not that difficult. I don't think anybody cares anyway. But yeah, so that is the R9 280X Tri-X Buildzoid edition. Well, right now it's still pretty stock in my opinion, but it's going to be a Buildzoid edition eventually. It's going to have all of the controls, except the 0.95 volts rail, because again, we've got one of those stupid controllers that I can't identify, which is really annoying. But yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. And if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, which, you know, that primarily includes feeding my GPU addiction. Well, actually, at this point, I'm not going to be buying GPUs for a while. I have way too damn many of them, so just need to stop going on eBay. Yeah, plus there's Ryzen coming out, and I guess I could buy a 5700, couldn't I? A Navi. And break that as I do. But yeah, where was I? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, if you'd like to support, you know, what I do with this channel, then I do have a Patreon. There's also Teespring. You can find Teesprings for merch. So, you know, shirts, stickers, posters, socks, hoodies. You can find a link to all of that down in the description below. And then there's, of course, the Patreon. If you don't want to buy anything and you just want to support me directly, that's also an option. There's links to both down in the description. And yeah, they do help out immensely with running the channel because, fun fact, I generally don't get sent like much in the way of review samples. Like, I buy a lot of the stuff you see on this channel, mostly because I wouldn't be allowed to do this kind of, like, I'm not, you don't generally get permission to abuse hardware like this unless your channel's like absolutely freaking huge. So yeah, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.